Hollywood International Sanctuary. Ooh, he just had to walk in like that. He has better lighting than me. He has a whole audience.
Hey guys, welcome to my master class with Brennan.
It's your master class. Oh, your volume isn't good, Brennan.
Yay!
Hello, Jareen.
Wait, I just realized.
Brennan, your volume needs your Brennan. Hello, Emma. Hi, RJ. All the fans of Brennan.
Oh my gosh, I realized other people from outside might.
Of course.
Hey.
Oh, this is so weird.
All right. So again, welcome to Pursuit IG Live, Brennan. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, can you repeat the question again?
Oh my gosh. Welcome to Pursuit IG Live, Brennan Lee.
Hey.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Brennan. I do marketing. I'm right now at church. I'm helping out. We're doing our services online, so we're making it work. It's a lot of work, but we're enjoying it. We're loving it, and it's so good to be with you today.
And it's all set up right now for tomorrow's filming, right?
Uh-huh.
So what have you been up to aside from this? Like, how's work?
So I'm working from home online right now, so that's great. I have a good team. It's a lot of fun. But honestly, I feel like for the first few weeks, I was stuck at home. I was going a bit crazy. I finally got into a rhythm, and I think with church slowly kind of starting up, there's a lot to do. So all that's keeping me busy. But yeah, it's crazy. It's a whirlwind. I feel like suddenly we went from 100% to 0%, and now we're back at 100%, and we're just plowing away. So it's a lot of craziness going on.
So Brennan, have you ever complained about something and saw results from your complaining?
Have I ever complained? I've complained a lot. I complain all the time. Right now, this is on my feet. I'm complaining about that.
About blisters on your feet?
Nasty. I complain a lot, but I don't always complain in front of other people. I think often I complain to the Lord, to the point as sometimes I'm thinking oh my goodness, when the Lord listens to me, be like, all this boy is not thankful for nothing. All he does is just complain. But
did you ever see results from your complaining? Like whatever you were complaining about was kind of resolved?
You know, the funny thing is, I think oftentimes in my complaining, I feel like the Lord changes my heart. And I think oftentimes I'm complaining about something, and then I'm asking God to change my circumstances. But I think in my heart. And yeah, it's just funny that way.
That's awesome. Well, I was, I think some of you heard this story. I was standing in line outside a bank recently, and these two guys kept complaining because the line wasn't moving fast enough, and it was really hurting my ears. And I was really feeling sorry for the people in the bank because of all their efforts to keep everybody safe. So I kind of wanted to say something, but I'm like, I don't think I have time for an argument right now. I don't know what's going to come out. And it just shows that these times have really been testing our patience, right? And so what have you found most challenging? Probably what you mentioned, just having to work from home.
So I primarily live by myself. So the only connections I really have is with my plants and with my house plants. I've been over a jungle right now. I have an entire balcony full of plants. But I think the hard thing about being a single person, especially when you're supposed to social distance, even from family, especially at the very start, I think the tough part was trying to be comfortable alone in the presence of God. I feel like that really kind of threw me into that, where I was forced to really just be by myself and just be comfortable with that. And I think I realized in that time a lot of what I define myself as is I define myself as part of my community. So I see myself, I belong to FSC, or I'm part of a team at Part of Change. But a lot of my identity was wrapped up with community of people. And when that was immediately taken away, a lot of it, I had to wrestle with who am I? How do I be comfortable with the Lord and just with Him? and finding a new like normal routine. That, yeah, I think it was definitely a struggle at
It was
first.
like finding joy in having God and not necessarily having the kind of social experience you want to have, like being close to people. That's awesome. And you know, I've been so positive and I keep telling people how blessed we are in BC because our rates of infection are low, how the government provides funding for people who have no income. And you know, every time, even strangers, I run into them at the lineups and I'm like, we're so blessed. You know, things are so good. But these last 2 weeks, it's kind of hit me as well. And it's realizing that, you know, even when you want to get something done and you feel that it's safe to get it done and you just want to get things accomplished, then all of these quarantine policies kind of set you back and hold you back. And it can be really stretching, right? But thankfully, you know, I realized that God is also just allowing it also to shape my character and show me, you know, how flexible are you really and how willing are you to adjust to this. Yeah. And at PURSU1TYouth, we've got to the point in our series on the book of Exodus where God had a showdown with the Egyptian Pharaoh. He sent 10 plagues to show him how much more powerful he was, to the point that the Egyptian Pharaoh finally let them go so they could worship God. And, you know, when you look at that, you think, oh, finally, you know, Moses, the underdog, achieved his purpose. He showed that having God to back him up makes him all powerful. And now the Israelites are free. And you think, you know, that's the end of the story. It's awesome. It's victorious. But actually, it was just the beginning. And the moment that they left Egypt was the beginning of like a wilderness wandering that was full of challenges and struggles. And you can almost compare it to this quarantine season, except it was worse, right? And one of the things that they faced with, we'll get to that, but I just want to like reiterate that our big idea today is that God hears us and that he listens. And sometimes even when we're complaining, he still cares and he still pays attention. And 1 John 5:14-15 says, this is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of him. Right? Isn't that awesome? Like just knowing that you have someone up there to back you up and to just kind of respond to whatever you're going through and have that answer that you need. And so for the Israelites, they now were free from slavery. They now had the wilderness before them, and they were destined to go into the promised land, Canaan, where there would be milk and honey and just like, you know, God's purposes for them and for their nation. But the first thing that they face is the Red Sea. The Red Sea is in front of them, and you have the Egyptian army behind them. And so it's like death in front and behind. And it was so suspenseful, like what's going to happen? Why did God free us just to die, you know? But here God comes in again and he says, Moses, just extend your staff over the Red Sea. And so Moses extends his staff, and sure enough, the sea parts, and the Israelites are able to walk and cross it on dry ground. Well, the Egyptian army was like, oh, there's a chance we can still catch them. So they start chasing them, only to find that the moment that they entered that area, God let the waters flood over them and drown them. And so that in itself was a huge miracle. And I'm going to read from Exodus 16 because of like the other challenges that came to them. I mean, when you're going camping, what do you need, Brennan? It's not enough to just have, like, what do you need when you go camping?
When I need to go camping, you're asking the wrong.
I know. Like, you don't like camping. I don't like camping. But what is a person, huh?
Faith.
Faith?
Faith. I mean, faith too. Y'all need faith to go through some.
Faith. You need faith to go camping. Well, the basic things, right? You need shelter if it's hot, right? Which is like normally would be a tent, and then definitely you need like food. You need water. And so these are just basic things. And here they are. They've set out, and I'm going to read from Exodus 16. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim, came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. And in verse 11, it says, the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat. In the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening, quail came and covered the camp. And in the morning, there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. So now they're finally, free from death, but they're thirsty and they're hungry and they're complaining. Instead of saying, God, you brought us here. Is there a way you can feed us? They just started grumbling and complaining, and they thought, we're just going to die here. And even though God could have just allowed them to die, because instead of asking him properly, they were complaining, he still reached out to them and extended the needs that they had, right? And it says later on, when God even gave them meat, there was so much that they each person could have gotten 4,000 pounds worth. That's a lot, right? But another thing to draw from this story is how God had told the Israelites to gather enough bread for the day only, and then gather twice for the weekend, which is normally their Sabbath would be a Saturday. So then on Friday, he said, you guys can collect twice as much food on a Friday, but on the other days, you have to only collect enough for the day. So Brennan, why do you think God told them to only collect enough food for the day rather than store up so much food like a lot of people are doing now, hoarding a lot of food? What do you think?
I think oftentimes when we live in this very industrialized, very forward a nation, we always try to think of ways that we can prepare ourselves and be ready for the worst. And I think oftentimes that puts our focus and our reliance upon ourselves without actually relying on God. So I think in a way, this forced Israelites to really depend on God each and every day for their daily.
Yeah, exactly. He needed them to trust him on a day-to-day basis. And he also wanted them to set aside a day, the Sabbath, to rest and just focus on him. Well, some of them didn't pay attention. They disobeyed, and they collected more than they needed for a day. And guess what happened? Yep, it rotted. The food rotted, right? But when it was a Sabbath, the food they had collected for 2 days' worth did not rot. And so we can compare the Israelite experience in the wilderness to our walk with God in this quarantine season. Committing our lives to Jesus and finding forgiveness and freedom in him, it can be so freeing and it can be so exciting. And a lot of people have amazing stories of how God just gave them a new life. But we'll find that it's just the beginning of our journey and walk with God, and that we're going to encounter a lot of struggles. We're going to encounter a lot of temptations. We're going to encounter disappointing experiences. And sometimes we even experience them from, people who also love God and who also know Jesus. And sometimes they're the ones who bring about disappointment in our lives. And, even though we've seen that God has done wonders in our life and that God has freed us and God has done miracles in other people's lives, there's a tendency to forget when you're in the moment of struggle, when you're in the moment of disappointment. And we tend to forget that God is able to free us from that circumstance, and God is able to come through and make a way for us. And that was the situation of the Israelites. They'd seen the 10 plagues in Egypt. They'd seen how God protected them from death. They'd seen God's power over creation. They'd seen God's provision. Yet time and again, they still forgot and they still complained. But still, God hears, right? And so this is a reminder for us that instead of forgetting God's goodness and God's wonders and complaining and drifting away from him, we should remember that God hears us and he knows what we're going through. And he wants us to tell him what we're going through. And he wants us to ask him for help. And he also wants us to show that we trust him, not just on on a one-time basis for salvation of going to heaven, but on a day-to-day basis of like going to him for instructions and obeying him, right? Like Jesus said in your prayer, you should say, give us today our daily bread. God wants us to trust him on a day-to-day basis and to believe that he has the future in his hands. And it's the same for the season that we're in. We know that the policies that the government is putting in place are for our safety, yet when we're held back in achieving our goals and experience loss, I mean, I'm sure it's really hard for businesses, right? It's hard for churches, it's hard for organizations, but it's also hard for individuals and for students. And so during this season, it's hard to believe that the best is yet to come, that this will soon be over and that we will get our freedoms back. I think one of the things that's really bothering me is are we actually going to get our freedoms back? But this is the time to really trust God on a day-to-day basis. So Brennan, what is an answered prayer that you have made that, you know, a prayer you had that made you realize that God hears?
Yeah. My golly, I feel like there are a couple, like recent, have been very pivotal in my life. I always kind of, if ever there's a time that I just doubt God's existence or where he's at, one of the stories that I think back to is I remember in my entire high school career, my entire university career, I'd always geared, I knew for certain I was going to go into healthcare, whether it was medicine, whether it was physiotherapy, whether it was dentistry, I knew that I was going to go into healthcare. I mean, I directed my entire high school career. I didn't enjoy sports, I didn't enjoy music, I didn't do any of that stuff, just so that I
focus on the sciences.
Focus on it. And I knew already in my first and second year of university that it was not for me. Like my grades were not competitive enough. I did not have the passion. But I was like, I'm so determined because this is something that I've worked so hard towards. On my fourth year, I was just about to graduate. I had applied, at that point, I knew I was not going to be a doctor. I had applied to 4 nursing schools, rejected by all 4 of them.
Wow.
But I got rejected from UBC. Then I was just devastated. I remember I was on a bus ride home and I was like almost in tears, maybe already in tears. And I was like, I had no idea what to do because like I had trained and bred myself this entire like past 8 years to go into healthcare. And it was not working out for me. And at the time, I remember I took a step back and I was asking God, like, why is this happening? Like, why am I put in this situation? And I remember at the time I was supposed to go on a Mexico mission trip and I was debating, should I go, should I not go? If I go, it's going to take up my entire summer. I'm going to come back and I have no idea what to do in September. And I just felt God saying, trust me, go on this mission trip, do what I'm asking you to do, and he'll take care of it all. Long story short, I very quickly, and it was just really miraculous how I ended up in the business master's program I got into, which is a whole different story. But long story short, applied for it. The day or the week before I think I left on the mission trip, I received confirmation that I got into it. I was like just so shocked because in my mind, I had always told myself, I'm never going to go into business. I'm never going to be, I always thought of business as like snakes and like just
snakes.
Otter snakes though, we love otter.
Businessmen are snakes, is that what you
yeah, so and then looking back, I really realized that if God allowed me to go into healthcare, I would not be thriving. I would not love it. I would hate going to work every single day. And now I wake up every single day excited for what I get to do. So no, I think hindsight's always 20/20, and you really can see God's blessing and his guidance during those moments.
So it's almost like your rejection from all the science fields that you're trying to get to was God's way of answering and leading you into something you'd really be passionate about and something you would enjoy. That's awesome. Exactly. Well, for me, it's a really small thing that I thought I'd talk about, and it's when I was I was in the Philippines, and I had this older lady that I really looked up to, and one day we were hanging out, and she was trying to park her car, and she's like, oh, my husband, when I ask God for a parking spot, he tells me, why bother God with just a small thing? Like God has bigger problems to deal with. And the other day, I think it was Victoria Day, my friend and I were trying to park at Ambleside. And if you would have seen the lineup of cars, you would have thought it was impossible to park. Like there was just insanely so many vehicles. And, you know, I asked God for a parking spot, but at the same time, we had a backup plan to park at a nearby mall and just walk the distance. And before we knew it, there was this car that went a different direction and I just followed it. And right then and there was a parking spot. Whereas my other friends, it took them like over 45 minutes to find a spot, right? And, you know, that's just a small thing, but it shows us that even in the mundane, day-to-day small things, things that we care about also are on God's heart. He does care about those small things, and he wants us to talk to him about those things. And I just want to encourage all of you who are listening to give all your cares and worries to God, because he cares for you. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything with prayer and thanksgiving, give your requests to God and let his peace overcome your life. And just, you may not see the answer right then and there, or your answer may be a no, or your answer may be like silence and nothingness, right? But just trust that once you've laid it at the feet of Jesus, it's something that you should not worry about anymore. And he cares, he hears you, he listens, and he wants to play a role in your life, in your everyday life, like whether it be just with your friends or your studies or your family issues, or even just your difficulty with dealing with some situations in your life. But at the same time, you know, when we give our cares and worries to God, it also requires us to trust him. And trusting him, like the Israelites, is shown in how we go to him on a day-to-day basis. And one of the ways is, you know, just talking to him in the morning when you wake up and giving your day to him. At the beginning of the week, just asking him to take leadership of that week, and you know, the cares and the worries you have on your heart, just laying him at your feet. And so Brennan, I want to ask you if you can pray for our world right now, and you pray for our students and leaders, that we would all lay our worries at the feet of Jesus and allow him to take them for us, right? And some of you, you know, you've heard about how we were considering to do summer camp at Alexandra House in White Rock, in Crescent Beach. A lot of hurdles came along the way, and at the end of the day, we were told we can't do overnight camps. However, we will still look at whatever responses you did to our poll, and we are still planning for day camps. And we said we will still check in with your parents how they feel about it. But just letting you know that we're trying to figure out how we can navigate this whole camp idea. So Brennan, pray for us.
Yeah, let's pray. God, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here, even online, in this online space, to just chat with one another, to be challenged by your word, to really also, dear God, to lean upon you in this time. God, we don't understand why this crazy pandemic has come here to Canada, has affected our lives, has changed the way that we live. And there's so much fear, dear God. Remember, every time I go to the store and you really look at someone, you can see the fear in their eyes. Just fear is a constant thing that a lot of people are walking through on a daily basis. But God, we thank you so much that in you and in your name, God, we have strength, we have power to overcome all obstacles, all fears, and dear God. So would you give us the strength today? Would you give us the courage? Would you help us to lean upon you, dear God, when we are faced with anxiety, stress, even depression, dear God? Would you help us to turn to you and lean upon you, our rock and our Redeemer? So we thank you, God, and we look to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much, Brennan, and thank you all for listening. Thank you for joining us on IG Live. And just a reminder, this Friday is our prayer call. We want to get together and pray for our world. So that's going to be at 7:30, and I'm going to post the Zoom link on our Instagram account and also send it by messenger if you ask it from me. And just remember that we're here for you, that we love you, and that we want to be able to be there for you in the areas that you need us. So just don't hesitate to give us a shout if you have any questions or need counseling. And don't forget to send us your quarantine posts. We want to know what's up with you. Lastly, we will see you online in our breakout group discussions. My group is meeting right after this, and so are AB's and Jude's group. I'm not really sure if the others are moving theirs to Thursdays, so just be in touch with your leaders. Love you all. Thank you, Brennan.
Take care.
Have a good one. Enjoy the
Yeah.
sanctuary. Bye.
Take care. Bye.